Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. She sensed a pair of frosty eyes staring in her direction. Roxanne turned to observe her surroundings in puzzlement. Nonetheless, she did not spot anything strange. "What's wrong?" Larry asked in a concerned tone as he noticed the change in her expression. Roxanne merely retracted her gaze and shook her head, though appearing a little apprehensive. "It's nothing." As much as she had said that, she seemed to be in her own world throughout the rest of the meal. She knew that the burning gaze she felt earlier was not only her imagination. Yet she could not find its source. Only after finishing the meal did she reluctantly put her suspicions aside. Like a gentleman, Larry proposed, "It's late. Let me send you back home." However, Roxanne turned him down politely. "There's no need. I drove here myself, so I better not trouble you." Hence, Larry had no choice but to respect her decision. The two made their way out while chatting happily, and only after watching her get into her car did he head to his and drive out of the parking lot slowly. Conversely, Roxanne had just fastened her seat belt and was about to start the car when someone abruptly pulled open the door on the passenger side. Then in came a man exuding a chilly aura from head to toe. Roxanne jolted in alarm and froze in her movement, but still instinctively looked in the direction of the passenger scat. After getting a good look at the person's face, the scowl on her face deepened. "What are you doing, Mr. Farwell?" Devoid of expression, Lucian shut the car door. "Nothing. My car has broken down. And coincidentally, I happen to see you here. Please drive me back, Ms. Jarvis." The chilling aura surrounding his body was almost palpable. Well aware how the atmosphere would only become tenser if she continued probing, Roxanne ultimately started the engine without uttering another word. Throughout the ride, the car was dead silent. Lucian locked his deep gaze on the woman next to him, his brows tightly knitted together. "She's so close with that dude. And they even met up just now. The way they interacted earlier inside, it seemed like they are a couple." At this point, Lucian could no longer hold his curiosity back and broke the silence. "That guy. Is he Archie and Benny's father?" Roxanne was instantly stumped, unable to believe what she had heard. "I wonder how did he get to that conclusion?" Her reaction made Lucian's frown deepen as he asked again, "It's him?" When she finally recovered from her trance, Roxanne replied in annoyance, "You're overthinking things." However, the man's tone remained displeased. "Then are you intending to let him become Archie and Benny's father?" Roxanne was even more dumbfounded. "I'm not. It's true that I'm close to Larry, but please don't make such baseless assumptions, Mr. Farwell. That will cause unnecessary trouble for others." Lucian stared at her with a scrutinizing gaze, and his grave expression lightened up a little. "If that's the case, you might want to be considerate of your children and perhaps keep your distance from other men, Ms. Jarvis." In truth, Roxanne had found the man a little weird since he got into the car earlier. At this point, even the words he said made her feel slightly uncomfortable. Why does he sound like he's being sarcastic and trying to imply something? Their brief conversation had already left Roxanne feeling annoyed, and her patience ran out after she heard his last sentence. "Mr. Farwell, what rights do you have to say that? Do you think you're doing fine in that aspect?" Lucian cognized the irony in her statement and furrowed his brows slightly. Roxanne gradually stopped her car and turned her gaze toward the man beside her. "Before you poke your nose into someone else's business, please mind yourself first, Mr. Farwell." "What did I do wrongly?" Lucian's face turned even grimmer. The cars in the front started moving again, so Roxanne lifted her leg from the brakes and set her eyes on the road. Everything felt even more ironic when she recalled Lucian's expression. "Aren't you engaged to Ms. Pearson? Don't you feel that it's inappropriate to be so close to me because of Essie? Besides, she doesn't even know who Essie's biological mother is." The more she dwelled on the matter, the more outrageous she thought he was. How dare he nag me? Lucian didn't expect her to bring Estella up, so he looked a little conflicted and replied ambiguously, "That's not the same thing." After all, Estella was her daughter. She sneered, "What's different? Besides, we have no other connection other than Essie, and we're not even friends. It's my right to decide who I wish to be friends with. It has nothing to do with you. Don't you think you're being a little too controlling?" As soon as she said that, the temperature in the car dropped. Lucian's expression darkened as he stared into the distance. After that, he didn't say anything else during the entire trip. Similarly, Roxanne pursed her lips tightly, and her mind was all over the place while she had the same expression on her face as Lucian. Both of them stayed silent for the rest of their journey. Turn and exit, he told her where he wanted to go, so she drove him there. Not wanting to say anything, she opened the door lock. Seconds later, Lucian got out of the passenger seat too. Since Essie's condition is basically stabilized now, it's not very appropriate for her to keep staying with me. Mr. Farwell, if it's convenient for you, you should bring her back. Roxanne had considered it throughout the journey. Despite her reluctance to be separated from Estella, Roxanne made that decision in the end. She was a little tired of the fact that Lucian would go to her house once every few days because Estella was staying with her. I've told him clearly from the beginning when we first met that we're already strangers, but lately he kept showing up in front of me and even did that during old Mr. Queen's birthday banquet. I'm really confused. What's our relationship right now anyway? Besides, it's obvious that Archie and Benny, especially Benny, have gotten closer to him. Benny had already taken a liking to him at the beginning. Moreover, the last 2 times Lucian gave Benny and Archie gifts made them even more fond of him. As such, Roxanne was afraid that Benny would tell Lucian everything about her one day. With Lucian's intelligence, he would definitely find out that Archie and Benny were his when the time came. Roxanne didn't even dare to think about what would happen after that. There was still no response from Lucian after some time, so she added, "Besides, it seems that Mrs. Farwell doesn't want Essie to stay with me." She didn't know why, but she felt that Lucian was staring at her with a strange look in his eyes. Unbidden, she stopped talking. Lucian gave Roxanne one last glance before he walked away without saying anything. Seeing his disappearing silhouette, she opened her mouth. Instead of saying anything, he just let out a quiet sigh before turning around and walking away. Once she got into the mansion, Archie, Benny, and Estella pounced on her happily. Roxanne squatted down out of habit, spread her arms, and the 3 of them jumped in for a hug. As Roxanne felt the warmth in her arms and took in the sweet scent of the 3 children, her heart melted instantly. She tightened her hug and pulled them closer to her as her worries disappeared. "I'm sorry. Something came up at night, so I couldn't fetch you. Have you eaten yet?" Roxanne asked gently in concern as she released the 3 children. Archie, Benny, and Estella nodded obediently. "Yeah. We've eaten. We have been playing for a long time." She secretly sighed with relief when she heard that. After that, she stood up. "What were you playing? Show me." Benny dashed toward the living room excitedly. "We were playing with the Lego bricks that Mr. Farwell gave us. It's really fun." On the other hand, Archie and Estella stayed by Roxanne's side. She was holding hands with the children, with one at each side as she watched Benny with a smile on her face. Obviously, the Lego bricks that Lucian had given them met their expectations in terms of the design and level of difficulty, and they loved the gift. In just one night, the 3 children had already made a base. However, no matter how Roxanne looked at it, that Lego set seemed boyish to her. She looked at Estella with concern in her eyes. "Essie, do you like this toy?" Estella's eyes lit up as she nodded fervently. "As long as I can play with Archie and Benny, I'm fine with playing anything." Seeing that, Roxanne felt relieved. After taking a look at the time, she played with them for a while more since it was still early. Archie and Benny were used to playing Lego with her, so each of them started to build their models seriously. Roxanne also decided to make something after she selected a model. When she was looking for a piece, she felt someone tug the hem of her dress twice. Roxanne turned around in confusion and saw Estella looking at her with a pitiful and helpless look. The little girl was holding a picture with the building instructions as she pointed at one of the pieces in it. It was obvious that she couldn't find the piece she wanted. Roxanne smiled in adoration. Just as she was about to help Estella look for the piece together, she remembered how the latter had spoken last time. If Roxanne had guessed it correctly, Estella would only occasionally utter 1 or 2 words when she was emotional. Thinking of that, Roxanne pretended to look confusedly at Estella. "What's wrong?" Estella pointed at the piece in the picture again and again, but Roxanne continued to stare at her in confusion. After some time, Estella got anxious and pouted. Roxanne's heart softened at that, and she caressed Estella's head. "If you want me to do something, you should say it out loud and tell me." Estella blinked innocently as she opened her mouth. Roxanne thought that she was about to say something, so she looked at the latter expectantly. Estella seemed to be trying hard, but after a few attempts, not a single word came out of her mouth. Feeling discouraged, she poked Archie and Benny, who were concentrating on building their models. Since Archie and Benny had spent some time building the models together with Estella, they could tell what she meant based on her movements. When they wanted to help her out, they saw that Roxanne was shaking her head at them behind Estella. Seeing that, Archie and Benny obediently sat back down again despite not knowing what Roxanne was trying to do. Roxanne said again patiently, "Essie can speak, right? Come on. Tell us. What do you want us to do?" Archie and Benny understood her intentions and nodded in response. "Essie, what's the matter?" All 3 of them looked at Estella expectantly. Estella sensed their anticipation, so she tried hard to speak until her face flushed red, but still, no words came out of her mouth. After some time, she began to panic and felt aggrieved. Soon, her eyes reddened. Roxanne had been observing Estella's expression the entire time. Seeing that, she quickly caressed Estella's cheeks and apologized, "I'm sorry, Essie. I was rushing things. Let's take it slow, Essie. Shoo. Don't cry. Don't cry." Meanwhile, Archie and Benny had already found the piece that Estella wanted from the pile of Lego pieces, and they happily showed it to her with their outstretched hands. "Essie, look. Is this what you wanted? We found it for you." She took it from them with a sniffle before she smiled again gradually. The next morning, Roxanne and the 3 kids had breakfast together. Estella sat beside her quickly and allowed the boys to feed her. Her cheeks pulled up adorably as though she were a chipmunk. Roxanne felt her heart soften at the sight of the obedient little girl. She also felt bad for her. "I believe Essie wanted to talk last night." With that thought in mind, she gazed at Estella affectionately. "Essie, do you want some buns?" Estella nodded eagerly. Roxanne picked up a bun but didn't place it on Estella's plate. She said, "If you want, tell me in words." Estella blinked, seemingly stumped by her request. Roxanne's brows furrowed in disappointment. "If you don't talk, I might not understand what you want. That way, I'll worry that I can't take care of you. Essie, can you get used to talking? Don't worry, I'll help you. We can do it slowly." Hearing her words, Archie and Benny placed their forks down. "Let's do it together. We want to hear Essie talk, too." As their expectant gazes fell on Estella, she glanced at each and every one of them. Her fists balled up as she forced herself to grunt, "Ehem." Roxanne and the boys were pleasantly delighted by her soft and adorable voice. Their eyes lit up in surprise. "I was just trying my luck and didn't expect Estella to talk for real." Despite wanting more, Roxanne knew she shouldn't be impatient. She stroked Estella's hair adoringly before placing the bun on her plate. Estella happy to learn that she could talk. She was still beaming jovially when Roxanne brought them to kindergarten. "Essie, you're in a jovial mood today, huh?" Pippa remarked when she saw Estella's precious grin. Estella beamed at her and nodded happily. Benny chimed in, "We're helping her to learn how to talk." Pippa assumed they were joking around. After all, she had taught Estella for some time but never heard Estella talk. However, Archie and Benny took the matter seriously. They were even discussing how to push Estella to talk during class. In between classes, Estella went to them as usual so they could play together. Nevertheless, Archie wasn't his usual self. He frowned and demanded, "What do you want from us?" Puzzled, Estella whipped her head around to look at Benny. "I want to play with Archie and Benny. We play together every day, right?" Benny added sternly, "Hurry up and tell us what you want. Archie and I are busy." Both of them were obviously treating her coldly. Estella recalled how she followed them everywhere back when they first came and how they ignored her. She really enjoyed playing with them recently, so she grew flustered and grabbed the pencil and paper on Benny's table so she could write her thoughts out. To her surprise, Archie pocketed the pencil. "Talk to us. Otherwise, we won't know what you mean." Estella gripped the corner of the desk sadly. "Didn't you promise Mommy this morning that you'll learn how to talk slowly?" Benny gazed at her. "If you can't talk, you can call our names. We've been calling your name Essie, but you've never said our names." Estella parted her lips but nothing came out of her mouth. She grew anxious and was about to burst into tears. Seeing that, Archie and Benny gave her the pencil instead of forcing her to talk. However, for the next few days, the two boys grew distant from her at home and at the kindergarten. Every time Estella came to them, Benny would huff angrily, "We treated you well, but you wouldn't even call our names. We're going to ignore you." For the next few days, Estella played with Roxanne at home but had no playmates at the kindergarten. She could only watch as Archie and Benny played with the other children and ignored her entirely. Finally, she plucked up her courage to run to them. The boys shared a look and put on stern expressions. "What do you want?" Estella clutched the corners of her skirt until it was all crumpled up. Her brows snapped together as she stared at them solemnly. Parting her lips, she tried to make a sound. Archie and Benny were both worried and anxious. If they had no idea she could actually talk, they wouldn't be forcing her to talk now. A while later, they were about to give up when they heard a tiny whisper, "Arch. Bun." Estella's cheeks were flushed, but she only managed to utter a syllable from each of their names. She hung her head low despondently. Both Archie and Benny were elated. They gave her a hug and exclaimed, "Good job, Essie." Estella was taken aback by their sudden hug. Hearing their praises, she snapped back to reality and broke into a smile. After the first try, it was easier for her to pronounce their names. As she seemed to have overcome an obstacle, Archie said solemnly, "Mommy treats you well, and you adore her, too. Am I right? But you've never called her name. I believe she's way more upset than Benny and me." Estella grew flustered once again. She grabbed Archie's shirt and said, "Arch, ie." She wanted him to teach her how to comfort Roxanne. A cunning look flashed across Archie's eyes as he explained slowly, "You called our names, so we've forgiven you. If you can call Mommy Miss Jarvis, she'll be delighted." Estella nodded vigorously. She then spent the entire day at kindergarten practicing the word Ms. Jarvis. Roxanne was really busy these few days. The project Harvey handed her was urgent and challenging. He might have informed her about the details, but there was still stuff he missed. Thus, Roxanne and her team had to figure out those by themselves. This was the first time she got to work with most of the researchers in the Research Institute. They weren't familiar with each other, and thus their project was behind schedule. Fortunately, Colby was around to help her catch up. By the time the first phase was completed, Roxanne was depleted of energy. She glanced at her watch and realized Catalina should have picked the kids up from kindergarten already. Thus, Roxanne drove back home to prepare dinner for them. Shortly after, the door to the mansion was pushed open. A series of footsteps sounded, followed by Archie and Benny's chatter. "Mrs. Farwell?" Catalina was about to head into the kitchen when she saw Roxanne inside. "Why are you back early today?" Roxanne shot her a smile. "I got off work earlier than usual today. Dinner's almost ready. Please help them wash their hands and we can eat soon." The kids ran into the kitchen and surrounded her. Benny began telling her stories about his day in kindergarten. Roxanne's exhaustion faded into thin air as she took in their smiling faces. "Miss..." An adorable voice rang out after Benny was done talking. Stunned, Roxanne lowered her head to look at Estella, who was standing beside her. Estella was hugging her leg and staring at her intently. The little girl's lips were still parted. Once their gazes met, she repeated slowly, "Miss." It took Roxanne a while before she regained her composure. Squatting down, she flung her arms around the little girl and replied happily, "Yes, I'm here." "That sounds amazing, Essie." Tears threatened to escape her eyes. After taking care of Estella for a while, she was already treating the little girl as her own daughter. When she heard Estella doing her best to address her as Miss Jarvis, she was transported back to the day when Archie and Benny learned how to call her Mommy. Despite being busy at work, Lucian would show up at Roxanne's door every day. His mind kept replaying the scene where Roxanne met Larry and how she questioned him harshly. After their argument, Roxanne even suggested he bring Estella back with him. Thus, Lucian only dared to observe the four of them from afar instead of showing up before Roxanne. Estella was becoming livelier day by day. Lucian assumed it was because she adored Roxanne. He had no idea she was starting to talk now. Meanwhile, Aubrey appeared at the Farwell Group's building when it was time to get off work. "I'm sorry, Ms. Pearson. Mr. Farwell just left." Caden reminded her when he saw her pressing the elevator button to head to the CEO's office. He had just got off work. Hearing that, Aubrey knitted her brows. "Where is he?" Caden shot her a professional smile. "I don't know his schedule after work. If you're curious, you're welcome to call him and ask him where he is." He gave her a polite bow and turned to leave. When the elevator doors slid shut before her, Aubrey bit her lip. A wave of fury crashed through her. Even though Lucian humiliated her in public and made her the laughingstock of the upper-class society, she refused to give up just yet. These few days she didn't stop contacting Lucian in hopes that he would change his mind. If Lucian were to change his mind and confirm their wedding date, the rumors would be scotched. That was the only way. There was nothing else she could do to turn the tables for now. Aubrey was bitterly disappointed after her constant tries to contact him were met with cold rebukes. After the incident at the birthday party, Lucian didn't bother comforting the Pearson family. Instead, he got all wrapped up in Roxanne. There was no need to call Lucian, for Aubrey knew he was obviously with that wicked woman. With that thought in mind, Aubrey pushed the elevator button and marched out. Back at the Pearson residence, she saw Samuel and Gina in the living room. When she came in, they were about to ask whether she got to meet Lucian when they noticed her expression. Comprehension dawned on them. Lucian isn't around again? For the past few days, Aubrey and her parents tried to meet Lucian, but to no avail. The man refused to spare them any time. Aubrey went to him a few times, but he refused her entry. Infuriated, Aubrey tossed her bag to the floor. It's all that Batch's fault. What exactly is so great about her? Gina frowned. Did Lucian go to her again? Aubrey plopped into the seat next to them furiously. Duh. Everyone's saying that he's going to marry Roxanne. I'm just a gold digger who clings to him shamelessly. He doesn't even want me even if I offer him everything. Gina and Samuel shared a look. They had heard this rumor too. However, just like Aubrey, they assumed the rumor would be scotched once Lucian agreed to the wedding. Alas, things weren't going their way. Gina patted Aubrey's back in a comforting manner. No matter what, we'll get his explanation soon. Calm down. You're asking me to calm down? If we wait any longer, that batch will marry him soon. Aubrey declared as a crazed look appeared on her face. Despite her fury, Gina remained calm. What Lucian wants may not be what the Farwells want. Didn't you see how his mother held a prejudice toward that woman previously? She reminded Aubrey. Aubrey calmed down slightly. Are you saying that? Let's pay the Farwell residents a visit, Gina stated coldly. The three of them discussed briefly before agreeing to invite Sonia and her husband to dinner at the waterfront that night. When Sonia and Elias arrived, Aubrey's family was already waiting in the private room. Aubrey hung her head low, seemingly despondent, while her parents wore grim expressions. When they walked into the room, Aubrey lifted her head and forced out a smile. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Farwell. Her smile slipped soon after as though she was nursing a grievance. Sonia was puzzled. Aubrey, what's the matter? Did someone bully you? Tell me about it. Gina's voice rang out. She's upset because of the rumors circulating outside. People are accusing Aubrey of being a gold digger, so she's been crying for the past few days. Aubrey immediately refuted, No, I know Lucian doesn't mean it. I've heard of the rumors, but I didn't take them to heart, she trailed off as her eyes turned red. Gina shot her a resigned and worried look. You've remained by Lucian's side these few years, so we know your feelings. But the outsiders have no idea. If Lucian, she paused and lowered her voice, if Lucian loves you, he won't allow you to suffer. He can ignore your plight, but I can't. Listen to me. It's time to break up with him. Sonia and Elias heard their exchange clearly. Sonia's brows snapped together as she demanded, What's going on? Is it about the rumor? I'll deal with the rumor right away. Gina let out a bitter chuckle and raised her head. How are you going to handle the matter? Everyone in Harrington knows about it. They claim that Aubrey and Lucian's engagement is only Aubrey's wishful thinking. Lucian doesn't have any intention of marrying her. They also claim that our family depended on your family to climb up the ranks. Now that Lucian has a new lover and their engagement hasn't been announced, they are saying that Aubrey is holding Lucian back. That's utter nonsense. Sonia's face darkened. Gina's lips twitched. They're right. For the past few years it was Aubrey who remained by Lucian's side. We're the only ones who know about the engagement. We've received a lot from Lucian. As he isn't interested in Aubrey, we shouldn't hold him back. She shot her daughter a distressed look. Aubrey still. Well, I've advised her for a couple of days, but she couldn't bring herself to break up with him. As her mother, it breaks my heart to see people gossiping about her. It's better to just get the pain over with rather than prolong the agony. I'll decide on behalf of her today to break their engagement. Aubrey hung her head low and trembled slightly. No one could see her expression, but it was pretty obvious that she was devastated. Sonia had no idea they would suddenly ask to break off the engagement. Her expression changed drastically as she declared, Impossible. Lucian and Aubrey have been engaged for years. How could we call off the engagement just like that? This is the only way to quell the rumors, Gina explained bitterly. Don't worry. I'll tell Aubrey to forget him so she could find her own happiness. Silence ensued. A moment later, Sonia said icily, There's another solution. Before Gina could say anything, Sonia took her bag and rose to her feet. Aubrey is the only daughter-in-law I'll acknowledge. Don't worry. I'll handle the matter personally. With that said, she spun on her heels and strode away without looking back. Inside the private room, Aubrey raised her head slowly. There were no signs of tears on her face. Just you wait. Gina announced smugly. Besides calling off the engagement, the only other way to quell the rumors was to arrange for the wedding. She was confident that Sonia shares her sentiments. The next morning, Lucian arrived at his office and noticed Caden was acting strangely. What's wrong? Lucian was baffled. Caden hesitated for a moment before blurring out. "Mr. Farwell, you and Ms. Pearson, what about me and her?" Lucian's brows furrowed. Sensing his confusion, Caden added carefully, "Are you really going to get engaged to her?" After saying that, Caden lowered his gaze hastily. Early this morning, he heard about the rumors saying his employer was finally going to get engaged with Aubrey. The public was kept out of the loop, but Caden had been working for Lucian for some time. He saw firsthand how close Lucian and Roxanne were, and he also knows that Lucian didn't harbor any clings for Aubrey. Even to an outsider like him, it was obvious that Aubrey's feelings were one-sided. For the past 6 years, Lucian refused to get engaged to Aubrey but suddenly agrees to it without warning. Naturally, that struck Caden as strange. Lucian's expression turned dark instantly. "Where did you hear it from?" Hearing his employer's fury, Caden promptly knew what was going on. He replied solemnly, "Everyone's talking about it." It was also published in a few morning papers. He pulled his phone out and showed Lucian the news that was published online. Farwell Group and Pearson Group, a marriage of convenience. The Farwells and Pearsons' marriage alliance finally coming through 6 years later. Lucian's gaze swept over the various news captions online. There were also comments praising that he and Aubrey were the perfect couple. At once, the surrounding temperature dropped. Find out who was the one who released the news. The discussion went wild just after one night. "I must find out who the hell dares to make an issue over my matter." Clearly, the culprit didn't bother concealing his or her identity. Less than an hour later, Caden went to Lucian's office to report his findings. Lucian's heart sank when he noticed Caden's expression. "Mr. Farwell, it was the chairman who gave the orders," Caden reported cautiously. He was shocked to learn that it was Lucian's father behind the matter. In fact, it was the chairman's assistant who contacted various media outlets and ordered them to release the news by dawn. Hence, a few media outlets had to hold back the news that was supposed to be published today so they could report about the marriage of convenience. It only took one morning for the news to be splashed all over the headlines. Almost everyone in Harrington was gossiping about the matter. Lucian stiffened momentarily before regaining his composure to nod. His face was devoid of expression as he said, "Got it. You may leave now." Caden nodded. Realizing that Lucian was in a foul mood, he walked out of the office and shut the door quietly. Inside his office, Lucian strode over to the window and stared out, feeling conflicted. For the past 6 years, his parents kept reminding him to get married to Aubrey, but he would always brush them off. Thus he assumed they understood his intentions. Alas, they ended up going against his wishes and announced the engagement to the outside world after urging him for 6 whole years. A long while later, he took out his phone to call his father. The call connected quickly. "What is it, Lucian?" Elias didn't head to work today and was currently enjoying breakfast. After answering his son's call, he cast Sonia, who was sitting across from him, a look. Sonia knew why her son had called. She took the phone from Elias. Elias allowed her to take his phone from him without complaining. Not knowing anything, Lucian asked sternly, "Were you the one who released the news about the engagement?" Caden had investigated the matter, but Lucian still wanted to hear Elias admit to it in person. To his surprise, his mother's voice sounded on the other end of the line instead. "It was my idea. What's wrong about it?" Sonia responded nonchalantly. Lucian stiffened as his brows snapped together. "Why didn't you ask for my opinion? This is my business. Besides, I've told you not to interfere. I have my own plans." Recalling what the Pearsons told her last night, Sonia scowled unhappily. "What other plans can you have? Are you going to ignore Aubrey forever? Aubrey has been the talk of the town no thanks to what you did. Did you handle the matter? Is that part of your plan?" Lucian felt an incoming headache. "How can you be sure that I didn't take action?" He had learned of the rumors that spread like wildfire after leaving with Roxanne under the crowd's watchful eyes. Even though he disliked Aubrey, he owed her grandfather a favor. Thus he wasn't about to ignore the matter. Before he could take action, things took a twist. He was dragged into the mess too. Lucian was caught off guard. That doesn't matter. This is the only way we can quell the rumors, Sonia declared, her tone allowing no room for negotiation. You're the reason the rumors started, so you'll be the one to end them. Aubrey has been with you for years, so you should bear responsibility by making her your wife. I announced your engagement on behalf of you. There's nothing wrong with that. Massaging his temples, Lucian tried hard to tamp down his irritation. You know I have no intention of marrying her. I'm pretty sure you know Essie's condition well. She never liked Aubrey. A few days later, Aubrey even struck Essie. You're now asking Essie to accept the fact that Aubrey's going to be her mother. Have you ever considered Essie's feelings? Sonia was unfazed. Essie didn't like Aubrey as they didn't get to spend time together. Anyway, Aubrey knew she was too harsh in punishing Essie. She knows her mistake now. You're going to get married soon, so Essie will need to accept Aubrey no matter what. They get to spend more time together if she accepts Aubrey earlier. She didn't wait for Lucian to respond and added, if you're not planning on marrying Aubrey, are you going to marry Roxanne instead? No matter what, I won't agree to let her enter our family yet again. I wouldn't have allowed Essie to stay with her for the time being if you hadn't told me that she could help Essie's condition. That was my biggest compromise. Lucian said not a word. Essie should have recovered by now. You should bring her back so she can spend more time with Aubrey, Sonia ordered. Also, remind Roxanne to not harbor any notions. I will never allow her to marry into the Farwell family for the second time. With that said, she ended the call. Lucian's expression scrunched up at once. Roxanne would always switch on the TV in the morning so she could listen to the news during breakfast with the kids. The news of the marriage of convenience between Farwell Group and Pearson Group has lasted 6 years. Recently, they've finally agreed to set a date for the engagement, the male newscaster reported. Roxanne's hand paused midair. She fell silent for a few moments before resuming her action nonchalantly. Archie and Benny promptly lost their appetite as their smiles crumbled. When they were overseas, they were curious and excited to find out who their daddy was. After coming back to Chanaye, they were upset to learn that he had a daughter. They despised him for abandoning Roxanne. However, after spending some time with him, they realized he wasn't as bad as they assumed. On the contrary, he was a caring man. Despite not knowing they were his sons, he treated them patiently and would give them gifts. They were about to accept him when the news of his marriage was announced. Thus, their impression of him hit rock bottom once again. Daddy's a bad guy. He treats us nicely but is planning on marrying another woman. He should have stayed away from us. Estella's gaze dimmed when she heard the news. I don't like Ms. Pearson. She's an evil woman. I want Ms. Jarvis to be my mommy. Daddy promised that he won't allow Ms. Pearson to be my mommy. Why did he break his promise? Does he not love me anymore? Estella was crestfallen. Sensing the change in her emotions, Roxanne frowned and asked, What's wrong, Essie? Estella pouted unhappily. Sad. For the past few days, Estella learned how to utter simple words to express her feelings following Roxanne and the boys' efforts. Roxanne's confusion heightened. Why are you sad? Can you tell me about it? Estella hung her head low and toyed with her fingers ruefully. I want Ms. Jarvis to be my mommy, but I don't think she likes Daddy. Daddy's a bad guy. How could he marry the bad lady? The 3 kids sulked unhappily throughout breakfast. Roxanne was exasperated when she realized they were sulking. After breakfast, instead of playing Legos together on the carpet, the kids trudged upstairs together. Roxanne knew they were upset after learning the news, but she couldn't figure out why. Besides, her thoughts were also a tangled mess. She wasn't in the mood to guess their thoughts. 6 years later, Lucian is getting engaged to Aubrey. His wish is finally coming true. She was lost in her thoughts when the doorbell rang. Roxanne snapped out of her reverie and went to open the door. The sight of the visitor gave her a huge shock. It took her a few seconds to regain her composure. "Why are you here?" The person mentioned in the news was standing at her door. He was dressed in a thin shirt and his hair was slightly messy. After their previous fight, she knew Lucian would often come to visit. However, he was tactful enough to not show himself before her. His was the first time they met in person after the fight. After hearing the news earlier, Roxanne had no idea how she should face him. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.